Welcome back, dreamers. Tonight I'd like to explore the haunting reality of virtual reality. Sometimes what we face in the virtual world can feel just as real, if not more so, as what we feel in our waking lives. Tonight's story is the end of our urban exploration theme. In the future, I'd love to explore the topic of being stuck in video games some more. If you think you'd enjoy that, let me know with a comment on tonight's story. Be sure to subscribe for tomorrow night's video, which marks the start of our brand new theme. Enjoy. I used to run. Not the kind of running you do in high school track or with fancy sneakers and water bottles. I ran because if I didn't, I'd be caught, bullied, beaten, stripped of whatever lunch money or dignity I had left that day. I ran because it was all I knew how to do. Growing up in a neighborhood like mine didn't leave you many options. The streets were cracked, the buildings boarded up, and the people, they were as broken as everything else. I dodged between abandoned houses and factories, breathing in the musty scent of decay as I scrambled over debris. I got good at it. Too good. Those old skeletons of the city became my sanctuary, my playground. I started to love urbex, urban exploration. It wasn't just running anymore. It was finding places no one else dared to go. I'd bring back stories, photos. Once I even brought someone with me. Her name was Emily. She was the first person who didn't laugh at my hobby. She even wanted to see it for herself. So I took her to one of my favorite spots, an old textile mill. The floors were rotting, the air was thick with dust, and the shadows seemed to stretch forever. I warned her about the dangers. She laughed it off. It happened fast. A rotten plank, a misstep, and she was on the ground below. Her scream echoing in the cavernous space. She survived, but her legs didn't. I visited her in the hospital, but she wouldn't look at me. Her parents' glares said everything she wouldn't. My family moved to the middle of nowhere after that. No buildings to explore, no shadows to hide in. Just endless fields and the dull monotony of small-town life. I filled the void with gaming. First regular consoles, then VR. The technology was my new escape. A digital rabbit hole where I could forget the weight of my guilt. Years passed, and I packed on the pounds, growing more and more tethered to my chair. My headsets and controllers became extensions of my body. Reality faded behind pixels and loading screens. My days blurred into each other. Wake up, eat, game, repeat. Sometimes I wouldn't even bother with the eating part. I'd order delivery and leave it half finished, too absorbed in whatever virtual world had my attention that day. I stopped looking in mirrors because I didn't want to see what I'd become. A pale, bloated shadow of the kid who used to leap between rooftops. I Out here, in the middle of nowhere, there wasn't much else to do. The nearest movie theater was an hour's drive. The local mall had 5 stores, and the only nightlife involved a single dive bar where everybody already knew everyone else's business. So I stayed in my room, the glow of my monitor the only light in my life. I wasn't living. I was existing. I found the game late one night, half asleep and browsing through obscure gaming forums. True exploration, true fear, true freedom. The tagline caught my eye. The game's description promised to recreate the thrill of urban exploration in hyper-realistic VR. Decaying structures, endless corridors, the works. It claimed to adapt to the player's psyche, learning from their fears and desires to create a bespoke experience. It even required custom peripherals, gloves to mimic touch, shoes that simulated ground textures, and a haptic vest for physical feedback. Pricey, but nostalgia can be a powerful drug. I hit buy. When the box arrived, I tore into it like a kid on Christmas morning. The setup was sleek, the hardware intimidatingly advanced. It took hours to connect everything, calibrating sensors and syncing software. Finally, the menu booted up, a minimalist black screen with white text. Begin exploration. Yes or no? I hesitated, the cursor hovering over yes. My heart raced, a familiar feeling I hadn't had in years. I clicked. The first environment was a crumbling factory, complete with creaking girders and scattered debris. The visuals were stunning. Rusted machinery, peeling paint, shafts of light breaking through cracked windows. My virtual footsteps echoed realistically as I walked, and the gloves let me feel the rough texture of a brick wall, the slimy dampness of a mossy pipe. I felt alive again. Adrenaline coursed through me as I climbed rusted ladders, squeezed through tight gaps, and limped over precarious drops. The game even included subtle scares, a distant door creaking open, shadows flitting at the edges of my vision. Nothing overtly supernatural, just enough to keep my pulse up. Then, I found the girl. She appeared in the background at first, just a flicker of movement. I thought she was part of the environment, an AI-generated Easter egg. But as I progressed, she showed up more often, standing in doorways, watching from windows, always just out of reach. She wore a white dress, torn and dirtied by the environments. Her hair hung over her face, obscuring her features. Something about her tugged at the edges of my memory, but I couldn't place it. The game shifted as I delved deeper. The environments grew more familiar. An abandoned school, a graffiti-covered subway station, my old neighborhood. It wasn't perfect. Details were skewed, exaggerated, but the essence was unmistakable. The girl was everywhere now. She no longer stayed in the background. She followed me. When I tried to run, she crawled after me, her movements jerky and unnatural. Her presence felt heavier with each level, her silent pursuit suffocating. My vest buzzed with simulated breath on my neck, her fingers brushing my shoulder. In one level, I found myself in the textile mill. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet, and I instinctively avoided the spot where Emily had fallen. That's when I realized the girl was Emily, or at least a twisted version of her. Her distorted voice echoed in the room.
You left me.
Her hands trembled, the gloves amplifying the sensation. "It was an accident," I whispered, though I knew she couldn't hear me.
You ran away.
Her voice grew louder, overlapping with my own childhood cries for help, my bully's taunts, and Emily's scream from that day. The sound crushed me, driving me to my knees. The final level wasn't a room, or even a building. It was the textile mill again, but distorted, like it had been through a nightmare's filter. The walls sagged inward, dripping with a dark, tar-like substance. Shadows moved unnaturally, pooling and stretching where no light source should exist. The air buzzed with a low, maddening hum. Emily's wheelchair sat in the center of the room, bathed in a sickly, flickering light. She was there, her back to me, her head tilted at an unnatural angle. I approached cautiously, the haptic vest tightening, as if anticipating something terrible. "Emily?" My voice cracked. She didn't move, didn't respond. I reached out with a trembling hand, the glove amplifying every nerve-wracking second I stepped closer. As I touched her shoulder, she wheeled around, and I stumbled back. Her face was warped, a grotesque mask of features stretched and twisted, as though they were trying to escape. Her eyes, empty voids, locked onto me, and her mouth opened impossibly wide, her voice spilling out like broken glass.
You left me.
I shook my head, backing away. "It wasn't my fault," I whispered, the words weak even to my own ears.
You ran away. You always run.
Her wheelchair creaked as she stood. Her legs were impossibly long, bent backwards at grotesque angles. She lurched toward me, every step producing a sickening crack. The vest buzzed with simulation of her breath on my neck, cold and damp. I turned to run, my old instincts flaring to life. But the game wouldn't let me. My feet were rooted to the spot. The haptic shoes vibrated with pressure, simulating a weight I couldn't escape.
You can't run anymore.
She hissed, her hand shot out, clawed and unnatural, and clamped around my throat. Pain exploded across my chest and neck, as the vest and gloves simulated her crushing grip. My vision blurred as she pulled me closer, her distorted face filling my view.
Say it,
She demanded. Tears burned my eyes. "I'm sorry," I choked out. "I was scared. I didn't know what to do." Her grip loosened slightly, but her gaze stayed locked on me, unyielding.
and now
The room around us began to shift, the buzzing hum growing deafening. Shadows writhed, and the walls began to close in. I felt her grip slacken entirely, and for a brief moment, her face flickered. Human again, soft and sorrowful. Then, she was gone, and I was left alone, the mill collapsing into darkness around me. The game didn't fade to black. It left me standing there, suffocating in the shadows. When the game ended, I found myself staring at the black screen for what felt like hours. My chest ached, and not from the haptic vest, but from something deeper, a weight pressing down on my soul. I pulled off the headset, the room spinning as I reoriented myself to reality. Or was this reality? For the first time, I wasn't sure. The next day, I told myself I'd uninstall it, delete the game, pack away the peripherals, and move on. But I didn't. Instead, I found myself scrolling through the game's forum, reading posts from other players. They described experiences eerily similar to mine, confronting past traumas, facing fears they didn't even know they had. And yet, none of them seemed to quit. They all went back in, again and again. I tried to resist, but the pull was too strong. I booted it up again, telling myself it would be different this time. I'd play smarter, go further, find a way to win, whatever that meant. The game welcomed me back with the same cold, indifferent text. Begin exploration? Yes or no? This time I hesitated, but not like the first time. My hand hovered over the controller, trembling. I knew what lay ahead. Pain, fear, the ghosts of my past. But there was something else too. A sick, twisted part of me that craved it. I clicked yes. The factory loaded, the creaking girders and peeling paint looking more vivid than ever. A shadow moved in the distance. Emily, or the game's version of her. She turned, her hollow eyes locking onto mine. My chest tightened as the haptic vest buzzed to life. I started to run, and just like before, she followed.